Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Pricing Guys. I'm Michael.
And I'm Abby.
Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite things in the world, Abby,
Okay.
and that is pizza.
Oh no, is this the deep dish debate?
No, we're not bringing back the deep dish debate, although we can bring that back in a future episode. What I want to talk about today, recently I opened an office in New York, spent a lot of time in New York. The dollar slice. So for those of you who aren't familiar, in New York, there's a lot of places that have the dollar slice. So you get a slice for $1. But the other thing that's weird to me is like you got the dollar slice and then you got like the 4.50 slice down the street. So my question to you is how good does that 4.50 slice have to be for you to trade up from that dollar slice? Are you telling me it's 3.5 times better? Like it's crazy to me that there's such a disparity in the price for a slice of pizza.
I think, it's an interesting question. And the first thing I think about is that dollar slice. A lot of them have creeped up to $1.50 now for those slices.
I still saw a couple dollar the other week.
And if we were talking about a higher out of pocket, like as you're talking about that 3 or 4 times discrepancy, if we were just talking about something that was like $20, people would be much more reactive to it, right? Being at a higher out of pocket.
So you just think it's just a load of pocket, no one's thinking about it. They got a fiver in their pocket, whether it's dollar or
Well, I think there's some unique things around pizza. So one of the differences when you're dealing with like that dollar slice or $1.50, I think they turn way faster. So there's a freshness aspect to it. And that's why, like me personally, myself, I like those shops because the pizza is always warm. It is always
you
fresh
just like
'cause
those
it's moving
shops because you're
quick.
cheap.
No, I think the pizza tastes better too, honestly. But I think that's one of the critical things around it that they price that way from a velocity perspective to drive that volume, right? And we know those downtown Manhattan rates for rent. Like we know those guys are taking price increases and their rent's up. But they've done the math and they've held these price points for a really long time now. But it has to be purely like a volume game. Like I don't think they're making a boatload on a slice, but they must be moving enough velocity to cover it, right?
So being a pizza fan, I've watched a lot of David Portnoy, right? So
Okay.
he's the
The
founder.
one bite guy?
Yeah, One Bite guy,
Yeah.
founder of Barstool Sports. And the thing that like drives me nuts about the One Bite is I love it. Like he goes out, he's got a big crowd now. I think he does a good review. But one of the things I never see him talk about is like how much the actual pizza costs. Because I see some of these pizzas that he's got in front of him, and I'm just like, ooh, that looks like really, really good. But at the same time, like he's not giving kind of that price point. So it's always weird to me because he's kind of ranking them at like, 7, 8, or like 9, or some of the garbage ones are really down there. But the one thing that he doesn't talk about is like the trade-off, right? Am I trading off like a 5 or a 6 like slice for $1 versus, okay, what is that like 4.50 slice?
You know what? I think that's a great interpretation because, he comes outside of the restaurant, he's holding his pizza box for those of you that haven't seen it, and he'll like pick up a slice and then he's looking at how floppy the slice is first off. Then he'll bite the slice, then he'll go and bite the crust, right? And for me, like, and this must be the Barstool guy, and he's probably, I don't know, he's probably a billionaire, but
I think he's doing okay.
okay. But, usually other consumers, like if you've just bought an expensive pizza or you've bought a cheap pizza, that's your first kind of point where the rubber hits the road. Like you're thinking about what you just outlaid on that pizza. And
But
then
are
it's,
you? Are you?
I think so. Cause like if I go into Casey's and I get a large pizza for like $8.99,
What are you hanging out in Iowa or something? Or Nebraska?
listen, I'm just shout out to Casey's. I'm not like, hey, I'm not expecting like prosciutto on this bad boy and basil and all that kind of stuff. Like I'm expecting something functional that's warm, that blah 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 blah. But if I just outlaid like $60 at like one of these like stone ovens, like I'm expecting a totally different experience. So I think price is definitely a consideration, especially going into it.
So you know what's crazy? you mentioned kind of the like fancy pizzeria stone oven. I was in New York City the other day,
Mhm.
and the guys I was with, they're like, "Oh, we got this pizzeria. We gotta go to this pizzeria. It's so good." Like some guy recommended it's the best pizzeria. So we go there, like same thing, like really nice atmosphere, like stone oven. First thing that should have like thrown me off was like I'm pretty sure it was like a bunch of like Eastern Europeans, like I think like Russians or Eastern Europeans, like serving the pizza, and I was like, "Ooh, like this is usually like it had a big Italian name and it was an Italian restaurant." And I was like, "Okay, we'll go for it anyway." And let me tell you, the pizza was awful. Like, just horrible, horrible pizza, and it's funny because I looked at the bill, it was like $35, $40 for the pizza, and then you had to tip on top of that, and then, of course, you have drink, but compare that, like, price per slice versus the dollar slice, like, the dollar slice you get is way better. Now the question is the value or is what you're paying for the atmosphere, the sitting down, the table service,
I think
all of
it's
that stuff, but
also
it's like it's the same product, but it's a very, very different experience.
yeah, and it's also the customer segment, right? Because I'm guessing they've kind of got a story behind that location. And it's more meant for like tourists, right? That,
Yeah.
hey, we went there, we checked it off. I had this experience. I can post it to my gram and then like take a bunch of pictures and get everyone to thumbs up it,
Did
right?
you just say post it to my gram?
Yeah, I know. You like
I
that?
I'm not even sure how to respond to that.
I'm just trying to throw something in there for you.
I
You can
feel
use it, Michael.
I feel probably like I'm like 20 years older now, like a guy with gray hair talking about the gram, like, I'm not sure what's going on anymore. Okay.
But I think a lot of it is knowing your customer segment, who you're catering towards, and making sure that pricing matches. But going back to kind of the one bite review, I think it's a critical element. Like we review products across categories, and price is always a driver. In a lot of cases, it can be higher or lower as a driver, but it's a consideration, right? And as you're thinking about the value versus price equation, it's important to have both of those things in mind.
But that's a great observation because you kind of talk about and you talked about earlier, like, hey, it's a volume game, right? If you're gonna go low price, it's a volume game. And if you're gonna kinda go higher price, lower volume, higher price, you don't need as much throughput to make the same amount of money. Like, what's really interesting about that model, though, is, like, we see it time and time again because we always talk about packaging and pricing and tiering and, like, upgrading that customer. Like, the interesting thing about pizza and specifically, like, pizza joints in New York City is that nobody is really playing the portfolio game or like the price discrepancy game. You don't go in somewhere and say like they got a dollar slice, but they also got like the $9 slice, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes they have a little bit more
Yeah,
like
you got the cheese slice, and then you got the
but it's always
yeah.
like it's the cheap place or like the non-cheap place. And I think like people do a little bit, but you don't really see that wide range of opportunity to kinda upsell that customer.
Probably some opportunity there. And as you think about that, I mean, if you're selling a dollar slice or $1.50 slice, and you can get that customer up into $4, I mean, that's all profit.
But I think that goes to the strength of brand, right? You don't see even you go to the grocery store, you go to a shelf, and yeah, you might have different sizes of ketchup, but you don't see Kraft Heinz selling like super dirt cheap ketchup, right? Private labels kind of sitting there. So I think that the restaurants and the individual spots are it's really the brand that kind of carries it. And either you live that brand of hey, I'm here, I'm a price fighter, or you live, hey, I'm a value added brand. And sure you can but to really you can't be both. You have to really differentiate and pick one lane.
So I know we've talked about a lot of themes today. I think summing it up for me is one, thinking about that price discrepancy that's out in the market. Michael started with that one versus $4.50, kind of such a huge price variation out there. Do we actually have the value to command that? Also thinking about the customer segments that you're serving, and do you have the right price to fit there? And lastly, I think, it's well, what's your last one, Michael? I should give you some airtime here.
Well, I was actually thinking maybe next episode we gotta go around and we gotta rate the pizza and then we gotta put the price beside it, get a little chart, get a little do a little bit of market research, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. But I think the last one for me is price and value. It's got to come together all the time.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's when you kinda talk about that price and values, like, you gotta choose a lane and you gotta really live by that identity, whether you're
100%.
pizza or anything else out there.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.